The Federal and Devaki Specialty Hospital jointly present the Madurai Marathon 2024 Run for Health on Sunday, October 20th, 2024. Entry is free for all.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. Tomorrow, which is the 16th of October, Jammu and Kashmir will get, after a 6-year gap, a new government. Omar Abdullah, the CM-elect, will be taking oath of office tomorrow in the morning, and that will effectively put an end to the long 6 years of president's rule that J&K has been under ever since Article 370 was abrogated. And for a period, a year, even before that. The major questions, perhaps, in everybody's mind, or at least everyone who's invested in what happens in J&K now, are whether the government in J&K will be stable, what kind of shape will it take, what would its relationship with the center be like. This is a government that will be a government of a union territory because J&K is no longer a state. What would be the role of the lieutenant governor? Will J&K follow the Delhi model, which we have seen playing out rather poorly in Delhi, with a lot of acrimony between the lieutenant governor and the elected government, which is led by the Aam Aadmi Party. So we'll touch upon briefly some of these issues. Let's start with perhaps the first question here. What would the new J&K government look like? This is going to be, of course, a coalition government. Mr. Omar Abdullah's party, the National Conference, has 42 MLAs. It also has the support of 6 independent MLAs now, taking the NC on its own beyond the halfway mark of 45. They now have, aside from the independents, 6 Congress MLAs, 1 MLA from the Aam Aadmi Party, 1 MLA from the CPM. But the big question for Mr. Omar Abdullah to address is not perhaps what his government would look like in terms of its composition, but the challenge would be what would be the representation for Jammu, the Hindu-dominated area of Jammu, compared to the representation that Kashmir gets. As the results that came out recently showed, it was the BJP that swept most of the Jammu plains, or rather the entire Hindu-dominated belt of the Jammu plains, and of course certain pockets of the Chenab Valley, which has now given reason for a certain unease in the Hindu-dominated Jammu, which has always been complaining of being alienated from governance. Mr. Omar Abdullah has said that his government will make sure that Jammu gets a share of representation and it has a sense of ownership and participation in the J&K government. One is expecting that the independents who are supporting the Omar Abdullah government now, a bulk of them Hindus elected from the Jammu region, will get hefty portfolios and thus a share in the government to address the concerns of the Jammu region and to stem any kind of divisions from escalating between Jammu and Kashmir. The other issue is, because this was a pre-poll alliance, the Congress and the National Conference had talked about a common minimum program which will govern the government, the order of business for the administration. But then the Congress now has only 6 MLAs. It is not really in a state where it can dictate terms to Mr. Omar Abdullah. What that CMP looks like, whether they actually go for a CMP, a common minimum program, we will have to wait and see. But there are a couple of very important issues that will perhaps take precedence in the early days of the administration. The alliance of the National Conference and the Congress had pushed for restoration of statehood for J&K. It's not going to be an easy thing. What route they take, we will need to wait and see. Whether they pass a resolution to that effect in the State Assembly, which of course will not pave the way for restoration, but will be a statement of intent. Whether they make that statement of intent on the very first day or in the very first session of the new J&K Assembly will be something that will be eagerly watched. The National Conference had also talked about steps for restoration of Article 370, but that's something that Mr. Abdullah has himself backpedaled on saying that uh, the National Conference does not expect restoration of Article 370 since it has to be done by Parliament. It does not expect the BJP to do it because it was the BJP that abrogated Article 370. And the National Conference will now wait for the next government to come. When that happens, we don't know. So that again is an open-ended question. And then, of course, is particularly for the Jammu region, where there was a lot of unease among the people over the Lieutenant Governor's decision to stop the Darbar move, which was the move of the administration, the shifting of the administration for 6 months of the summers to the Jammu region, which brought in a lot of economic activity to Jammu. That Darbar move was stopped by the LG. The National Conference and the Congress had both promised that as soon as they come to power, they will start steps for restoration of the Darbar move. That is again something that will uh, perhaps take precedence in the early days of the government. The second most important question is, what would this government's relationship with the center be like? This is, remember, not a government like the government that Mr. Omar Abdullah in his first term as chief minister uh, in 2008 was heading. This is a government of a union territory. It does not have the powers that that a state government had, or which Mr. Omar Abdullah had when he was chief minister the last time round. A lot of acrimony has crept in between the center and the Kashmir parties, the India Alliance, over what the India Alliance says, crippling of the powers of the state, powers of an elected government in J&K. This is going to be a two-way traffic. Mr. Omar Abdullah will have to make certain concessions, perhaps, to what the center wants. The center will have to show a big heart and make certain concessions to allow the elected government to function smoothly. We've seen how in Delhi uh, that has not been the case. The Aam Aadmi Party government, Mr. Kejriwal, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal earlier, now Atishi, they've both had recurring flashpoints with the lieutenant governor and the center over how Delhi is to be run. Will that kind of a scenario play out in J&K also? Is the other question that one will need to wait and watch. There's also a very typical problem, very typical to Kashmir, which does not exist in Delhi, which is of internal security, militancy, law and order, border security, and external security, because it's a border state. It has a checkered history in terms of militancy. Uh, there are separatist elements in the state. There are pro-Pakistan elements in the state. There are actors, who advocate dialogue with Pakistan. There are actors who advocate no dialogue. In J&K, a lot of discussion over the last few days, from what I gather through my conversations with politicians there, has been whether J&K will see a clash of the Doval doctrine versus a clash of the Dulat doctrine. Uh, for the uninitiated, let me explain this in simple terms. The Doval doctrine, people say, is the line that is sort of taken by the current dispensation, of which Mr. Ajit Doval is the NSA. That line is to have no dialogue with separatists, to have no dialogue with Pakistan, uh, to basically take a very nationalistic, in their sense, a very nationalistic view of things, that as long as things don't normalize from Pakistan's side, we will have no dialogue with them. Then there is the Dulat doctrine, which the National Conference has been known to push forward with. The Dulat doctrine, people talk about connecting it to Mr. A.S. Dulat, who was the former Raw Chief, someone who's very close, one of Mr. Farooq Abdullah's closest advisors in terms of security of J&K, which talked about keeping everybody in the loop, keeping the channels of dialogue open with everyone, with all stakeholders, from the Hurriyat Conference, the separatists, as well as keeping the dialogue open with Pakistan to ensure that normalcy returns faster and more swiftly to J&K. So will we also see a clash of these two doctrines with the center pushing forward with what Mr. Ajit Doval, the NSA, wants, and Mr. Farooq Abdullah or Chief Minister Mr. Omar Abdullah trying to maneuver somehow the Dulat doctrine of conversation, of dialogue into their administration, and with the different elements in Kashmir. So that's the other aspect of the relationship with the center. Finally, this is something that we've seen over the last few days of Mr. Omar Abdullah being very conciliatory in his statements to the press. Of course, those are statements that are meant for the ears of the central government. He's been very conciliatory. He's talked about Mr. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, being a very honorable man. And he said that the Prime Minister had said that he will look into the issue of restoring statehood. And I appeal to him to look into it quickly. He's talked about not having a confrontation with the Lieutenant Governor to begin with on day one. He wants a working relationship with the LG and through the LG with the center. As I said earlier, this is going to be a two-way traffic, so we'll have to wait and see how the center responds to it. There are two prickly issues here. One, because of the amendments made, because of the J&K Reorganization Act and certain clauses within it, the Lieutenant Governor now has powers to nominate 5 members to the J&K Assembly, and these are members, these are MLAs who will have voting rights when it comes to deciding the fate of the government if there is a confidence motion or a floor test. The National Conference, other parties of the India bloc have all taken exception to that. They all want the nominations to be made on the aid and advice of the J&K government, the UT government, and not on the whims of the Lieutenant Governor or the central government. There has been no clarity from the LG office so far on whether he's going to take the advice of the J&K government in terms of when he nominates these members. The BJP in J&K has been saying that all 5 members to be nominated will be from the BJP. So that is going to be a tricky issue to navigate. The center, the LG can both take it easy there, but will they is a question that we'll have to wait and see. Will they go ahead with the nominations and the nominations without the concurrence or the advice of the J&K government? Or will they take the advice of the J&K government and then do the nominations? Or will they hold on to the nominations for the time being? The other issue, of course, is, and this is still only speculation, there have been rumors in Srinagar that the center, as a gesture of goodwill, could change the Lieutenant Governor, bring in a new LG, so that Mr. Omar Abdullah can start with a clean slate. These are only rumors. We don't know the source of the rumors, whether they're coming from the center or they're more a kind of enunciation of the expectation of the National Conference. So whether that happens, we'll have to wait and see. But it's going to be a very, very tricky government to navigate, and it'll be as much the duty of the central government as of Mr. Omar Abdullah to ensure that the government does not end, administration in J&K does not end at a stalemate, does not go down the pipe hole that we've seen the Delhi administration go down. We'll have to wait and see. But tomorrow, big day for J&K. After 6 years of president's rule, the union territory now is going to get a new government.
The Federal and Devaki Specialty Hospital jointly present the Madurai Marathon 2024 Run for Health on Sunday, October 20th, 2024. Entry is free for all.